What would you do upon discovering a mythical Lycan bound by chains of searing silver? Would you flee, or would you, like a solitary scholar named Acra, feel a surge of compassion that eclipsed all terror? In the depths of the ancient gloomwood forest, beneath a sky weeping rain, she made a decision that would irrevocably alter her world. She freed a colossal black Lycan from its agony, a simple gesture of mercy. But as the creature's bones began to splinter and reshape into the form of a man more formidable and commanding than any monarch, she discovered her selfless act came with a steep price. He wasn't merely a Lycan. He was the Lycan king. And he had just declared her his. For Acra, the world was a realm of silent order, organized and alphabetized. Her existence was a carefully arranged assortment of historical records and forgotten charts, lived within the sacred, dust-filled quiet of the Oakhaven University archives. At 26, her grandest escapades involved deciphering the faded script of a medieval manuscript or pinpointing the faint watermarks on colonial-era documents. She found more comfort in the company of paper ghosts than in the tangled web of human relationships. Her latest fixation was the Gloomwood Forest, a vast, primeval wilderness bordering the university grounds. While official documents designated it a protected natural area, local lore spoke of older, more sinister things. Legends told of a time when the forest was a dominion ruled by beasts who could walk as men. Acra, ever the pragmatist, filed these tales away as folklore, interesting cultural notes for the margins of her research. That evening, a storm was gathering. The heavens had turned the shade of a dark bruise, and the wind howled through the architecture of the archive hall. Spurred by an unusual restlessness, Acra had chosen to walk along the forest's perimeter, hoping the electric charge in the atmosphere would settle her mind. She cinched her worn tweed coat tighter, the fragrance of rain and damp soil a welcome relief from the dry, papery scent of her work. She wandered deeper than she normally would, tracing a nearly invisible path overgrown with ferns and ancient roots that coiled over the earth like hardened veins. It was then she heard it, a noise alien to the building storm. It was a deep, throaty sound, a growl of such profound suffering that it resonated through the soles of her shoes. It was the sound of a creature in its death throes. A cold, sharp fear pricked at her skin. Every rational instinct, sharpened by a lifetime of caution, urged her to retreat. This was the opening scene of a horror story. Yet, beneath the fear was a stream of empathy she could not quell. It was the same impulse that led her to rescue spiders from the drain and nurse a fledgling raven with a shattered wing. She pressed through a thorny bramble that tore at her arms and stumbled into a small, hidden clearing. And that is when she saw him. The air snagged in her throat in a choked, silent gasp. It was a Lycan, but to call it such was like describing a typhoon as a light gust. It was a monstrous being, a creature torn from mythology. Its massive form, easily the size of a small carriage, was a monument to restrained power, even as it lay defeated. Its fur was the color of obsidian, a light-devouring black that seemed to absorb the twilight from the air, matted with mud and a darker substance she recognized as blood. But it was the restraints that made her heart clench. Thick, heavy chains were coiled around its mighty limbs and torso, securing it to an ancient, gnarled oak. They weren't made of iron or steel. They radiated a faint, nauseating white luminescence, and where they made contact with the creature's pelt, the flesh beneath was charred and blistered, smoke spiraling from the wounds in thin, acrid plumes. Silver. Pure, consecrated silver. The Lycan's head hung low, its immense frame shaking with unending, agonizing spasms. As she watched, it raised its head, and for a heart-stopping moment, its eyes met hers. They were not the eyes of a common animal. They were molten gold, wise and ancient, and filled with a sea of torment that snatched her breath away. A quiet whimper, a sound of absolute hopelessness, escaped its jaws. Her world shrank to the clearing, to the tortured creature, and to the malevolent glow of the silver. The legends she had so casually disregarded rushed back, not as folklore, but as a grave warning. Still, gazing into those golden eyes, she did not perceive a monster. She saw a captive being systematically tortured. "Oh, you poor creature," she whispered, her voice unsteady. Cautiously, as if approaching a trapped divinity, she moved closer. The Lycan tracked her, a low growl vibrating in its chest, a warning born of agony and deep-seated mistrust. "I'm not going to harm you," she said gently, her voice barely a whisper above the wind. "I want to help." She circled the beast, her researcher's mind instinctively assessing the predicament. The primary lock was a heavy, archaic mechanism fused to a thick silver collar around the Lycan's neck. There was no hope of picking it. She examined the chains themselves, where they were hammered into the earth. The stakes were driven deep, but the ground was soft from the rain. In her research bag, she always kept a small geology hammer and a durable pry bar for studying rock strata. They were her only implements. It was madness. It was suicide. The Lycan could tear her apart the instant it was free. It let out another pained cry as the silver hissed against its skin, the stench of burning fur and flesh assaulting her senses. That sound sealed its fate, and her own. "All right," she breathed, pulling the pry bar from her satchel. "All right, we're doing this. Please don't devour me." She forced the tip of the pry bar under the head of the stake, securing the chain on its right foreleg. The Lycan stiffened, its golden eyes riveted on her, its muscles coiling. It was mustering what little strength it had left. For what purpose, she couldn't know. To attack her, or to flee. She threw all her weight onto the bar. The damp earth groaned. The stake gave way slightly. The Lycan remained unnaturally still, observing, waiting. The first heavy drops of rain began to splatter down, pasting her hair to her cheeks. She grunted with exertion, her muscles screaming in protest. With one last, desperate heave, the stake pulled loose with a nauseating sucking sound. One chain was free. A wave of lightheadedness washed over her. She scrambled to the next stake, her hands slick with mud. The rain was now a torrential downpour, soaking her to the bone in moments. She worked feverishly, propelled by a compulsion she didn't comprehend. The Lycan never broke its gaze. It didn't growl again, but a peculiar tension saturated the air, an electric expectation that had nothing to do with the storm. At last, only the main collar and the chain binding it to the tree were left. The lock was an impossibility, but the chain itself, it was wrapped tightly around the trunk. If she could just create some slack. She pushed at the enormous chain, trying to slide it up the bark. It was impossibly heavy. The Lycan, as if understanding, shifted its immense bulk, granting her the slightest inch of leeway. It was enough. With a final, sobbing gasp of effort, she heaved a link over a knot in the wood. It slid, then another, and another, until the entire length of the chain slithered down the trunk and landed in the mud with a heavy thud. It was free. The colossal Lycan lay in the mud for a long moment, its breathing ragged and shallow. The silver collar remained around its neck, a circlet of pure agony, but its limbs were unbound. Slowly, painfully, it pushed itself up, its legs trembling. It stood on four unsteady paws, a magnificent, terrifying silhouette against the storm-darkened woods. Acra backed away, her heart pounding against her ribs. The adrenaline receded, replaced by a tidal wave of dread. What had she done? She had just unleashed a monster. The Lycan took a step toward her, then another. It halted just a few feet away, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from its body, even in the downpour. It lowered its massive head, and those burning golden eyes, filled with an emotion she couldn't decipher, stared directly into hers. She stood frozen, paralyzed by fear and a strange, breathtaking awe. Then, the world spun on its axis. The Lycan's body convulsed. A sound tore from its throat that was not a growl or a whimper, but a human scream of unbearable pain. Acra watched in horror as a nauseating crack echoed through the clearing, louder than the thunder. Its bones were breaking, shifting, reforming under its dark, wet fur. The transformation was a symphony of visceral horror and savage grace. Acra could only stand rooted to the spot as the storm raged around them, a fitting backdrop for the impossible event unfolding before her. The Lycan's spine elongated with a series of sharp, percussive cracks. Its snout retracted, the features contorting and smoothing into something shockingly human. Fur receded into skin, and massive paws reshaped themselves into hands and feet. The creature, the man, fell to his knees in the mud, his body still trembling from the violent metamorphosis. He was naked, his skin slick with rain and streaked with blood from the silver burns. He threw his head back, a guttural roar of fury and relief tearing from his throat, a sound that was both beast and man. For a moment he remained on his knees, his head bowed, his broad shoulders heaving as he dragged air into his lungs. Then slowly, he looked up, and his eyes found hers. They were the same eyes, the same molten gold, filled with ancient power and an intelligence that was now terrifyingly human. They burned into her, not with the simple gratitude of a rescued animal, but with an intensity that felt like a physical brand. He rose to his feet in a single, fluid motion. Akra's mind struggled to process what she was seeing. He was impossibly tall, well over 6.5 feet, with a physique that seemed carved from the mountain stone around them. His body was a tapestry of lean, powerful muscle, littered with scars old and new. The most horrific were the sizzling, blackened welts left by the silver chains. Dark, wet hair was plastered to his forehead and fell to his shoulders. He was brutally, savagely beautiful, a fallen god of the wilderness. And around his neck, a stark testament to his ordeal, was the heavy silver collar. He took a step towards her. Instinct screamed at Akra to run, but her legs were leaden. She was a mouse before a lion, and she knew it. He stopped directly in front of her, so close she had to crane her neck back to look at his face. Rainwater dripped from the sharp line of his jaw. He lifted a hand and she flinched, but he only reached up and touched the silver collar. His jaw clenched, and with a grunt of effort, he gripped the thick metal with both hands. Muscle corded in his arms and back, and with a shriek of protesting metal, he tore the silver collar from his neck and hurled it into the darkness of the forest. The skin beneath was raw and bleeding. His gaze dropped back to her, sharp and possessive. He surveyed her from head to toe, her soaked tweed jacket, her trembling frame, her wide, terrified eyes. A low growl rumbled in his chest, a sound that was no less menacing coming from a human throat. He leaned in, invading her space, and inhaled deeply. His eyes closed for a fraction of a second. "Rain, old paper, and courage," he murmured, his voice a low, gravelly baritone that seemed to vibrate through her very bones. An impossible combination, his golden eyes snapped open, pinning her in place. "You freed me," it wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact, heavy with unspoken consequence. Akra could only nod, her throat too tight to form words. "Do you know who I am?" he asked, his voice soft, almost dangerously so. She shook her head, rain dripping from her chin. A humorless, predatory smile touched his lips. "I am Kale. And what you freed was not some common stray." He reached out, his calloused fingers gently, almost reverently, touching a strand of her rain-soaked hair. A jolt like lightning shot through her at his touch. It wasn't unpleasant. It was a shock of connection, of sudden, terrifying awareness. Her entire body lit up with a feeling she had never experienced, a hum of energy that seemed to recognize him. Every Lycan in this hemisphere, from the lowest subordinate to the proudest alpha, bows to one king, he continued, his voice dropping to a possessive whisper. His thumb brushed against her cheek, surprisingly gentle. "You are looking at him. Lycan King." The words from the old legends echoed in her mind. It was real. All of it was real. Akra's breath hitched. Terror, pure and unreasoning, finally broke through her paralysis. She took a stumbling step back. I have to go." His smile vanished in an instant. His hand shot out and clamped around her wrist. His grip wasn't painful, but it was absolute, an unbreakable manacle of flesh and bone. "Go. You're not going anywhere." "You can't," she began, her voice a squeak. I can, he interrupted, his golden eyes blazing with an ancient, proprietary fire. You saw me in my most vulnerable state. You smelled my blood, my pain. You touched the silver that held me, and you broke it. He pulled her closer, his face inches from hers. His scent filled her senses, pine needles after a storm, raw earth, and an undercurrent of pure masculine power, ozone and dominance. The laws of our kind are old, little one, older than any human kingdom. An act of such magnitude, it creates a bond, he growled, his gaze dropping to her lips. You saved the life of the Lycan king. You saw his weakness and did not exploit it. You chose mercy. He leaned in until his lips were beside her ear, his warm breath sending shivers down her spine. That act, he whispered, the words a vow and a sentence, makes you mine. The word mine struck her not as a word, but as a brand. A current of energy flowed from him into her, a dizzying, intoxicating wave of something she couldn't name. It felt like destiny, like a lock clicking into place. It was terrifying, and in a deep, hidden part of her soul she never knew existed, it felt like coming home. Before she could react, a chorus of howls erupted from the surrounding forest. They were not the lonely cries of wild animals. They were organized, powerful, and they were getting closer. Cale didn't even flinch. He straightened up, pulling her against his side, his arm and possessive iron bar around her waist. My men, he stated simply. Within moments, shadows detached themselves from the trees. 5 enormous Lycans, each one larger than any wolf she had ever read about, padded into the clearing, their eyes glowing in the gloom. Their gazes were fixed on their king. Then one by one, with the same horrifying cracking of bones, they shifted. 5 tall, powerfully built men, naked as their king, now stood before them. They immediately dropped to one knee, their heads bowed. My king, said the foremost one, a man with a severe face and a jagged scar across his eye. We tracked the traitors sent this far. We feared the worst. Cale's golden gaze was hard as flint. Forlag will pay for his treachery, Marius. But first. His eyes softened almost imperceptibly as he looked down at Acra, who was trembling uncontrollably in his hold. We have a guest. The man named Marius finally looked at Acra, his eyes widening in shock. He looked from her, a frail, soaked human, to the broken silver chains in the mud, and then back to the raw wounds on his king's body. Understanding and disbelief dawned on his face. She. Marius began, speechless. She freed me, Cale confirmed, his voice leaving no room for argument. He looked down at her, his expression a mixture of possession, triumph, and something else, something that looked unnervingly like reverence. The fates have a twisted sense of humor. My captor delivered me directly to my salvation. He turned his attention back to his men. Get her something to wear. We are returning to the citadel. She is to be treated with the highest respect. She is under my personal protection. Anyone who shows her a hint of disrespect will answer to me. His voice dropped, taking on the timbre of an absolute monarch. The human is mine. She is the king's mate. The journey to the citadel was a disorienting blur for Acra. One of the warriors, a woman with fierce, intelligent eyes named Lyra, had given her a dry cloak that smelled of leather and the wild. It was a small comfort against the chilling reality of her situation. She was half carried, half guided by Cale, his arm never leaving her waist, his presence a suffocating, protective shield. They moved through the forest with a supernatural speed and silence that her human legs struggled to match. The citadel was not a castle of fairy tale stone and turrets. It rose from the heart of the gloomwood forest like a natural geological formation, a fortress of dark, formidable rock and ancient wood, seamlessly integrated with the mountain it was built against. Yet, as they passed through the colossal gates, Acra saw evidence of modern technology, recessed lighting, security cameras, and the silent hum of a hidden power source. It was a place of primal power and contemporary strength. She was led through vast halls that felt more like cathedral-like caverns. The air was warm, smelling of wood smoke and roasting meat. Other people, Lycans, her mind supplied with a shudder, stopped and stared as they passed. Their faces were a mixture of shock, confusion, and awe. They didn't look at her, not really. They looked at Cale, at his wounds, and at the way he held her plastered to his side, as if she were a priceless treasure he'd just recovered. Whispers followed them like the rustling of leaves. Cale didn't take her to a dungeon, but to a suite of rooms that were more luxurious than any she had ever seen. A fire already roared in a massive stone hearth, casting a warm, dancing glow over plush rugs, intricately carved wooden furniture, and shelves filled with books bound in real leather. A set of floor-to-ceiling windows looked out not onto the forest, but a sheer drop down the mountainside with a breathtaking view of the valley below, shrouded in mist. It was beautiful. It was a gilded cage. "You will be safe here," Cale said, finally releasing her. The absence of his touch left her feeling strangely cold and unmoored. A woman with silver-gray hair and kind eyes entered, carrying a tray with food and drink. She introduced herself as Alina, the head of the household staff. She didn't seem surprised by Akra's presence, only concerned. "The king asked me to bring you something warm, miss," Alina said, her voice gentle. "And there are clothes for you in the wardrobe." "A bath has been drawn," Akra could only nod, numb. When Alina had left, Cale moved to stand before the fire, his back to her. The firelight played over the powerful muscles of his back, highlighting the raw, angry burns from the silver. "You must have questions," he said, his voice low. "Questions?" Akra's voice was a dry croak. She finally found her footing. "Questions don't even begin to cover it. You've kidnapped me. You've dragged me to this place and declared me your mate." The word felt foreign and absurd on her tongue. He turned to face her, his golden eyes intense. "I did not kidnap you, Akra. I secured you." "There is a difference, not from where I'm standing," she shot back, a spark of her usual spirit returning. "I have a life, a job, a small, boring apartment that I would very much like to return to." "You can't," he said flatly. "And your life was never as boring as you believed." "What is that supposed to mean?" He sighed, running a hand through his damp hair. "The one who chained me is Lord Forlag, the alpha of the Shadowfen clan. For generations, his line has coveted my throne. He is ambitious, cruel, and he practices forbidden magic. He did not succeed in killing me. He will now view my escape as a declaration of war." He took a step closer, his voice dropping. "And you, Akra, are at the center of it. You are the woman who freed me. To him, you are either a weapon to be used against me or a symbol of my miraculous recovery, a symbol he will want to destroy. Letting you return to your world would be a death sentence." Her blood ran cold. "So, I'm a prisoner here for my own protection." "You are not a prisoner." Cale growled, a flicker of frustration in his eyes. "You are my mate. The mate bond is the most sacred thing in our world. It is a connection of soul and destiny. When I first saw you, when you showed me mercy instead of fear, I felt it click into place. It's a pull of certainty. I know you feel it too." She did. That was the most terrifying part. She remembered the jolt when he touched her, the strange sense of rightness when he held her. She hated it. She hated him for making her feel it. "I don't feel anything except confused and scared," she lied, hugging herself. His expression softened, the hard lines of the king giving way to something more vulnerable. "I know this is overwhelming. I will not force anything on you. But you must understand, I cannot let you leave. My instinct, my very soul, screams at me to protect you, to keep you close. To let you walk out that door would be like tearing out my own heart." Before she could form a response, the doors to the chamber opened and Marius, the scarred second-in-command, entered. He bowed his head to Cale. "My king," he said, his voice grim. "The council has assembled. They demand to know what happened. And they demand to see her." He flicked his eyes towards Akra, a hint of distrust still lingering there. Cale's jaw tightened. The Lycan king was back in an instant. They will be addressed. But she will not be paraded before them like a curiosity. Prepare the strategy room. I will meet them there. Marius nodded. And Forlag, scouts report his border patrols have doubled. He's locking down his territory. He's a cornered rat, Kale snarled. He knows I'm coming for him. But he doesn't know my new strength. He glanced at Acra, and the possessive fire was back in his eyes. He has no idea what fate has given me. Marius left, and the room fell silent again, the air thick with tension. Acra watched Kale, this impossible man who was both a brutal king and a captive of his own instincts. He was right. She was trapped. But it wasn't just the walls of the citadel that held her captive. It was the invisible, undeniable thread that now tied her to this violent, magnificent, and terrifying man. Her quiet, orderly world of books and maps was gone forever, replaced by a world of alphas and mates, of ancient laws and blood feuds. And she was standing at its epicenter. The days that followed were a strange blend of opulence and confinement. Acra was treated like a queen. She had luxurious clothes she never would have chosen, food that was rich and exquisite, and the entire library of the citadel at her disposal, a collection that made her academic heart ache with its wealth of ancient, handwritten texts. Yet, she was never truly alone. A silent guard was always posted outside her door. Lyra, the fierce female warrior, was often assigned to accompany her on walks through the citadel's surprisingly beautiful internal gardens. Lyra was cool and distant at first, her suspicion of the human mate palpable. But Acra, used to dealing with prickly archivists, was persistent. She didn't pry or plead, she asked questions. She asked about the citadel's history, about the tapestries on the walls, about the hierarchy of the clan. Slowly, grudgingly, Lyra began to answer. She explained that the Lycan king's mate was their future lunar queen, a figure of immense importance. Acra's human status was an unprecedented complication, a source of fear and instability for the clan. Kale was a constant, overwhelming presence. He sought her out every day. He would join her for meals, sitting in a silence that was somehow more intimate than conversation, his golden eyes watching her every move. He would find her in the library, not speaking, but simply taking a chair across the room, his powerful form a silent testament to his claim. He was trying, in his own possessive alpha way, to court her. He brought her things he thought she would value, a rare first-edition manuscript of Celtic myths, a delicate silver pendant shaped like a Lycan, she noted the irony, and once, a single perfect white rose he'd apparently scaled a cliff face to retrieve. "You resist the bond," he stated one evening as they sat before the fire in her chambers. He had dismissed her guard, a clear sign of his desire for privacy. "You fight it, I don't know what it is," Acra admitted, her voice soft. "It's a pull, an awareness of you. It's distracting and frightening for me, it is the center of my world," he confessed, his voice a low rumble. "Before you, my focus was my throne, my people, my vengeance against Forlag. Now, they are all still there, but you are the sun they orbit." He looked into the flames. "When I was in those chains, I was prepared to die. I was gathering the last of my strength to force a shift that would have killed me, just to deny Forlag the satisfaction of capturing me alive. Then I smelled you, rain and old paper and hope. You became my reason to hold on." His vulnerability chipped away at her defenses. This wasn't just a possessive beast. He was a king who had been brought to his knees, and she had been the one to save him. The bond hummed between them, a tangible thing in the quiet room. But something else was happening to her, something she couldn't explain. Her senses were sharpening. She could hear conversations from down the hall, smell the type of wood burning in the hearth, see the individual dust motes dancing in a moonbeam. She started having vivid, disturbing dreams. She dreamt of running through the forest on 4 legs, the wind in her fur, the scent of deer on the air. She would wake up with her heart pounding, the phantom sensation of phantom muscles still aching. One afternoon, while walking with Lyra in the garden, a servant carrying a tray of metal goblets stumbled, sending them crashing to the stone path. The sharp, clattering noise should have made her jump, but instead, it sent a searing pain through her ears. She cried out, clutching her head, the sound amplified to an unbearable degree. Lyra was at her side in an instant, her suspicious eyes now wide with alarm. "Acra, what is it?" "The noise," Acra gasped, her hearing slowly returning to normal. "It was so loud." That evening, Marius sought her out. His usual stern demeanor was replaced with a look of intense curiosity. "The king would like you to meet someone," he said, his tone formal but no longer hostile. "An elder. Her name is Seraphina." Seraphina was ancient. Her face was a beautiful, wrinkled map of a long life, and her eyes, a pale, cloudy blue, seemed to see more than just the physical world. She met Acra in a quiet chamber filled with drying herbs and astrological charts. Kale stood in the corner, his arms crossed, a storm of anxiety brewing in his golden eyes. The elder didn't speak at first. She simply walked around Acra, sniffing the air delicately. She took Acra's hand, her own feeling like cool, dry parchment. Her cloudy eyes stared intently at her face. "Remarkable," Seraphina whispered, her voice a dry rustle of leaves. "The blood runs thin. So very thin. But it is there. I can smell the echo of it." "What are you talking about?" Acra asked, her heart beginning to pound. Seraphina looked at Kale. "The mate bond is not a mistake. It is an awakening." She turned back to Acra. "My dear, tell me about your family." "Your line, they were academics, historians," Acra said, confused. "My parents died when I was young. I was raised by my grandmother. We're from the north, near the old borderlands." Seraphina's eyes lit with understanding. "Ah, the northern clans. Many bloodlines were shattered during the Great Purge 3 centuries ago. The humans, with their silver and their fire, hunted us. Some of our kind fled, hid themselves among humans, intermarried. Their children lost the ability to shift. After a few generations, the Lycan blood became a whisper, a dormant gene. We call them the echoes." The room tilted. Acra stared at the old woman, her mind reeling. "You are not fully human, child," Seraphina said gently. "You are descended from a line of Lycans. You are a dormant. You carry the blood of the Lycan within you." "That's impossible," Acra breathed. "Is it?" Seraphina countered. "Your heightened senses. Your dreams of the hunt. The bond with the Lycan king would never have taken root so strongly in a pure human. His immense power, his very proximity, is acting like a key. He is unlocking what has been asleep in your blood for generations." Kale pushed off the wall, his face a mask of awe and disbelief. She is one of us. In blood, if not yet in form." "She is," Seraphina confirmed. "The first full moon since your bonding is in 2 nights. It will be a time of immense volatility. The power of your bond, combined with the lunar cycle and her awakening blood. What will happen, I cannot say. She might simply feel ill. Or. The unspoken possibility hung in the air, heavy and terrifying. Or she might shift. The world had been turned upside down when she freed a Lycan in the forest. Now the ground had fallen away completely. She wasn't Acra, the human academic caught in a supernatural war. She was a part of it. The blood of the beast, the king, and the kingdom ran through her own veins. The revelation of her heritage sent Acra into a spiral of confusion and introspection. She spent hours in the Citadel's library, devouring texts on Lycan lineage and the history of the northern clans. The fables and legends she had once studied as an outsider now read like a personal history, a secret diary of her own blood. The world didn't just contain monsters, she was one. Kale, for his part, was both ecstatic and terrified. The fact that she was Lycan-born, however distant, legitimized their bond in the eyes of his people and his own heart. It was a gift from the fates he'd never dared to ask for. But the impending full moon cast a dark shadow over his joy. A first shift, if it happened, was agonizing and dangerous, even for a well-prepared adolescent. For an adult woman whose body was unprepared, it could be lethal. He grew even more protective, his presence a constant shadow. He forbade her from leaving her wing of the citadel, an order that sparked the first real fight between them. "You can't lock me away," she argued, standing before him in the library, her hands on her hips. "I'm not a delicate doll, Kale, I am protecting you," he roared back, his alpha dominance flooding the room. "Your scent is changing. You smell less human, more Lycan, more mate. Forlag has spies everywhere. If he learns what you are, that you are not just my human mate, but a dormant Lycan of a lost line, you will become the single most valuable target in this war, so, I'm supposed to hide until this is all over," she challenged, refusing to back down from his glare. "That's not living. It's waiting." Their argument was cut short by the shriek of an alarm horn, a sound that echoed through the stone halls. Within seconds, Marius burst into the library, his face grim, a drawn sword in his hand. "Assassins," he bit out. "In the West Garden." They bypassed the outer patrols, Kale's face turned to stone. The West Garden was where Acra had been walking with Lyra not an hour before. It was secluded, a known vulnerability. He let out a snarl that was pure beast. "They're hunting you," he said to Acra, his voice a deadly low growl. "They were waiting for you," he shoved her behind him. "Marius, secure the library. Bar the doors. Nothing gets in or out." To Acra, he commanded, "Stay here. Do not move from this room." Before she could protest, he was gone, moving with a blur of speed that was barely human. The heavy oak doors of the library slammed shut, and the sound of a massive bar falling into place echoed in the sudden silence. She was alone. Trapped. But the silence didn't last. A faint scratching sound came from the other side of the room, from a tall, narrow window that overlooked a small decorative balcony. It was a window she'd noted as being too small for a man to fit through. She was wrong. The glass pane shattered inward, and a figure, slender and clad in black leather, slithered through the opening. A second one followed right behind. They were Forlag's assassins, moving with the fluid grace of predators. In their hands, they held daggers with a faint, sicky white gleam. Silver. Fear, cold and absolute, seized her. But then something else rose up to meet it, a hot, protective fury. This was her sanctuary. They were invaders. And they were a threat to Kale's kingdom. "The prize is here," the first one hissed, his eyes locking on to her. As they advanced, her newly awakened senses went into overdrive. The room seemed to slow down. She could smell the cold metal of their daggers, the sweat on their skin. She could see the twitch of a muscle in the lead assassin's jaw before he moved. He lunged. Acra, acting on an instinct she didn't know she possessed, grabbed a heavy, leather-bound book from the table and threw it. Her aim was perfect. The corner of the massive tome caught him square in the face with a sickening crunch. He staggered back, howling in pain, blood pouring from his broken nose. The second assassin was on her in a flash. She had no time to think. She ducked under his wild slash, the silver dagger whistling past her ear, close enough for her to feel its unnatural cold. A primal growl ripped from her own throat, a sound that shocked her as much as it did her attacker. Her back hit a bookshelf. She was cornered. The assassin smiled, a cruel, triumphant sneer. "The Lycan king will enjoy finding your body," he raised the dagger for a final thrust. At that moment, the library doors didn't just open, they exploded inward, blasted off their hinges into a shower of splinters. Kale stood in the doorway, but it wasn't the man she knew. His eyes were pure, blazing gold, his teeth elongated into fangs, and his hands were tipped with vicious black claws. He was halfway through a shift, a terrifying hybrid of man and beast, radiating a killing intent so powerful it made the air vibrate. He saw the assassin, the dagger poised over Akra, and he moved. He didn't run. He crossed the room in a single, impossible bound. He seized the assassin by the throat with one clawed hand, lifting him effortlessly off the ground. The assassin choked, his dagger clattering to the floor. "You will not touch her," Kale snarled, each word a death sentence. With a final, brutal twist, he snapped the assassin's neck. The body fell limp. The other man, his nose a bloody mess, scrambled for the window, but Lyra and two other warriors filled the space, their swords drawn. He was trapped. Kale turned to Akra, his monstrous form slowly receding back to its human shape, though his eyes still glowed with residual fury. He rushed to her side, his hands hovering over her, checking for injuries. "Did he hurt you? Did the silver touch you?" he asked, his voice a roar of panic. "No, I'm okay," she whispered, her body trembling with adrenaline. He pulled her into a fierce embrace, burying his face in her hair, inhaling her scent as if to reassure himself she was real and unharmed. "When I felt their presence so close to you," he murmured against her skin, "I felt a part of my soul begin to die." The attack was a turning point. Akra's fear was replaced by a grim resolve. She was no longer a passive victim in this war. She was a target, yes, but she was also the future Lunar of this clan. She was a Lycan, even if she didn't know how to be one yet. She went to Lyra the next day. "Train me," she said, her voice steady. "I'm not going to be helpless again. Teach me how to fight." Lyra looked at her, a long, appraising stare. The last of her suspicion was gone, replaced by a hard-won respect. "Good," she said with a sharp nod. "The training begins at dawn. The Lunar of the Gloomwood clan does not cower." The revelation of Akra's heritage shifted the Citadel's atmosphere from suspicion to a tense, hopeful anxiety. Yet beneath it, the poison of betrayal festered. Forlag's assassins couldn't have penetrated their defenses without help. There was a traitor within Kale's trusted inner circle, a thought so venomous it set everyone on edge. While Kale and Marius hunted this phantom enemy, reviewing every report and interrogating every guard, Akra dedicated herself to a different kind of preparation. The approaching full moon loomed not as a celestial event, but as a personal reckoning. A wild, restless energy sang in her blood, a prelude to the agony or empowerment Seraphina had foretold. Refusing to be a liability, she pushed herself through grueling training sessions with Lyra. The fierce warrior, now a staunch ally, taught her the brutal economy of a knife fight, the sharp crack of breaking a wrist, the art of turning a scholar's soft hands into weapons. The aches and bruises were a welcome distraction, grounding her even as her senses grew unnervingly sharp. Kale was a storm cloud of controlled rage, the weight of command and the fear for Akra's safety carving new lines into his face. The only peace he found was with her, in the quiet late hours in the library. "One of my own sold me to Forlag," he confessed one night, the firelight casting his face in stark relief. "And now they remain silent while he plans his next move. I feel like a king of a house with serpents in the walls." It was this conversation that sparked Akra's intuition. While Kale searched for grand betrayals, she thought of the small details. She immersed herself in the Citadel's archives, not as a historian, but as an investigator. She analyzed patrol routes, supply logs, and architectural plans, her newly honed senses picking up on things others missed. It was on a requisition scroll for climbing equipment that she first felt a prickle of suspicion. The gear, specialized silk ropes and grappling hooks, was identical to the type the captured assassin described. The order was unusual, buried among mundane requests for grain and steel. The signature at the bottom was a chilling, elegant script, Silas. It seemed impossible. Silas, the kind, scholarly strategist who had advised Kale since his youth, the man who had always treated her with gentle respect. A motive seemed non-existent. Driven by a dreadful certainty, Akra made her way to Silas's chambers. She didn't need to break in, he was with Kale in a council meeting. The room was tidy, filled with books and maps, but her sharp hearing, a gift of her awakening blood, caught the faint creak of a floorboard under a heavy bearskin rug. Beneath it was a cleverly hidden trapdoor. The small chamber inside held a lead-lined box designed to block the scent of its contents. Her heart hammering, Acra opened it. Inside, lying on black velvet, was Forlag's silver sigil and a folded letter. Her blood ran cold as she read Silas's precise handwriting. He was not a simple traitor, he was Forlag's informant, and his communications were chillingly detailed. Kale is blind to the threat in his own home. The human, Acra, carries the dormant blood of the northern clans. His bond to her is an obsession. The full moon is in 2 days. Her first transformation will throw the citadel into chaos. During that window, Kale will be distracted, his focus entirely on his mate. That is when you must strike. Use his love to destroy him. The betrayal was intimate and absolute. Silas was using her coming transformation, as the bait in a trap meant to kill the man she loved. Clutching the letter, she ran. She didn't hesitate, bursting into the strategy room where Kale sat with his council. Every head turned, but her eyes locked on only one man. Silas, she said, her voice shaking with cold fury. Forlag has your family, doesn't he? The strategist's scholarly demeanor crumbled, his face draining of all color. He stared at her, speechless. Kale was on his feet in an instant, the pieces clicking into place with horrifying speed. Your wife and daughter, he said, his voice a low, dangerous growl. He's holding them. That's his price. A choked sob escaped Silas's lips. He sent me a lock of my daughter's hair wrapped around a silver dagger. My king, he confessed, his voice breaking. He swore he would send them back to me piece by piece if I did not obey. What was I to do? The air crackled with the tragedy of it all. This was not a betrayal born of ambition, but of desperation. Kale's expression was a mask of granite, hiding a storm of emotions. He looked at the broken man who had been his mentor, then at the letter in Acra's hand. The sorrow in his eyes hardened into the cold, unforgiving flint of a king at war. You will tell us everything, Kale commanded, his voice leaving no room for argument. Every plan, every rendezvous point, every weakness Forlag ever confided in you, he nodded to Marius. Take him to the cells. Double the guard. As Silas was led away, Kale took the letter from Acra. He crushed it in his fist, the parchment crackling in the tense silence. Forlag wants to use the chaos of the full moon, he snarled, his golden eyes blazing. He wants me to be vulnerable and distracted by your transformation. He turned to face his remaining council, his voice ringing with absolute authority. Then we will not give him chaos. We will give him war. The full moon rose like a spectator to a coming slaughter. Its light washed the stony valley between the two territories in a ghostly silver, illuminating the lines of warriors ready to clash. The air was cold and sharp, smelling of pine and imminent bloodshed. On a high ridge overlooking the battlefield, Acra stood within a ring of Kale's most elite guards. The primal energy of the moon was a raging tide within her, a force that made her bones ache and her skin feel too tight. Every fiber of her being screamed to run, to hunt, to surrender to the wildness. But she fought it, her mind locked on the battle unfolding below. Using the intelligence tortured from Silas and her own analysis of Forlag's tactics, she had helped Kale craft a strategy of preemption. Instead of being ambushed, they had become the hunters. The battle began with a single, unified howl from the Gloomwood clan. Kale, in his massive black Lycan form, was the tip of the spear. He crashed into Forlag's lines like a force of nature, a blur of claws and fury. Acra watched, her heart in her throat, her soul feeling every blow as if it were her own. His power was magnificent, a king defending his realm. For a time, it seemed they would be victorious. But Forlag was a serpent, always holding one last drop of venom. From the rear of his forces, a volley of crossbow bolts arched through the air. They weren't steel-tipped, they glittered with the malevolent white of silver. A roar of pure, unadulterated agony tore through the valley, a sound that bypassed Akra's ears and struck her directly in the soul. She saw Kale stumble, a silver-fletched bolt buried in his shoulder. The poison was immediate, sapping the strength from his colossal form. Forlag, a massive grey Lycan, seized the opportunity, lunging for the wounded king. The sight of Kale falling, of her mate in mortal peril, was the key that unlocked her. The pain inside her erupted, but it was no longer just pain. It was rage. A scream ripped from her lungs, morphing from a human cry into a feral, blood-chilling howl. The world dissolved into a searing red haze. Her bones cracked and reshaped, not into the form of a wolf, but into something else, something older. She grew taller, her muscles coiling with terrifying power. Her fingers elongated, her nails hardening into vicious black claws. Fangs descended from her gums, and when she opened her eyes, they blazed not with gold, but with the pure, luminous silver of the moon itself. She was a primal avatar of lunar fury, a warrior goddess born of love and rage. With a snarl that echoed across the valley, she launched herself from the ridge. She didn't run, she bounded down the sheer rock face with impossible speed, landing amidst the stunned warriors like a fallen star. Her focus was singular, the grey Lycan standing over her fallen mate. She hit Forlag with the force of an avalanche, her claws tearing through his flank. He was thrown back, yelping in shock and surprise at this unknown foe. He turned, and for the first time, Akra saw fear in his eyes. She gave him no quarter. She was a whirlwind of instinct and ferocity, her every strike aimed to maim, to drive him back, to protect what was hers. Her savage assault bought Kale the precious seconds he needed. With a guttural roar, he seized the crossbow bolt in his teeth and ripped it free. Fueled by the sight of his mate fighting for him, he surged to his feet. Power flowing back into his limbs, he stood side by side with Akra, the black Lycan and the silver warrior, a united front of terrifying power. The sight broke Forlag's nerves. Facing not just his rival but this new, unknown power, he tucked his tail and fled, his remaining forces scattering into the darkness. The battle was won. As the adrenaline faded, Akra's form softened, and she collapsed, exhausted, back into her human self. Kale was instantly there, shifting back and catching her in his arms. He held her as if she were the most precious thing in the universe, his face a mask of awe, relief, and profound love. The remaining Gloomwood warriors stared, their weapons lowered. They were looking at their king, saved, and at the woman who had saved him. "My lunar queen," he breathed, his forehead pressed against hers. "You are the moon and the stars. You are my salvation." She looked up at him, the last of the silver light fading from her eyes, replaced by a love that was as deep and wild as the forest around them. He lowered his head and kissed her, a fierce, possessive kiss that sealed their victory and their bond, a promise made in the crucible of battle under the light of the full moon. She had freed a Lycan bound in silver chains and, in doing so, had unleashed the queen within herself. And so Akra's story, which began with a simple act of compassion in a storm, became a legend whispered through the forests. She journeyed from a life of quiet solitude to the heart of a vibrant, dangerous, and loving kingdom. She proved that true strength isn't just about claws and fangs, but about the courage to act, the will to protect, and the power of a love so strong it can awaken the deepest parts of your soul. This tale is a reminder that sometimes the greatest destinies are found not by searching for them, but by having the heart to answer the call of a creature in pain. If you were captivated by Akra's courage and her epic love story with the Lycan King Kale, let us know. Your enthusiasm helps bring these worlds to life. Show your support, share this saga with a friend who loves epic romance, and be sure to follow our channel. We have so many more tales of fated love and untamed hearts waiting to be told, and we want you here for every single one.